Welcome to the video on case care. There's not a lot to taking care of cases in the simplest level. What we need is some spent cases. These have been deprimed and neck sized. You will need, if you're using virgin brass or if you're using something like a revolver or a semi-automatic weapon that can change the brass characteristics after it's been fired and ejected, you might want to do what we call full size the brass. But if you have a single shot or a bolt action, you may very well find that all you need to do is resize the neck portion of the brass, and that's a very simple thing. But you'll need a set of dies, neck sizing or full size. Need a case trimming tool of some sort. It's always a good idea to have a brush that's of the caliber that your bullet is so that you can clean the neck. A small screwdriver or a primer pocket tool. I actually have a professional primer pocket tool, but because I'm shooting a video I can't find the thing, but this will work. And it's real handy to have some sort of a case gauge so that you don't have to load the trimmer each time to find out whether or not you actually need to trim the case as a result of it being fired. And it's not necessarily a requirement, but clean brass cycles better in the gun, so I always like to use a tumbler when cleaning the brass. It's up there on the wall, and the thing that you want to use is an approved brass cleaner, something that doesn't have Brasso type of or ammonia type of cleaner in it, because that can actually weaken the shell casing itself, and you don't want to do that. So you want to use something like Flitz or something like that that's actually made for cleaning rifle shells, or a media that has the cleaner built into it. So we'll get right on to it. Now I'm shooting this off of a tripod, so I've repositioned the camera to give a little better shot of the press and a little less of me. You don't really need a lot of me in this thing. What we have here in this turret press is we have a full-size die here. Now this would be used if you're shooting virgin brass and you need to do the initial sizing, or if you're using a gun that cycles through that can cause some mechanical changes in the brass as you use it. And you would need to lube your cases with a little oil pad when you run through a full-size die like that, because it works to keep it from sticking. Or in this case, since I'm using, this is my 270 and it's a bolt action Remington, I actually have a neck sizing collet die, and it works by squeezing the neck alone, so that since I have cycled this once, at least once, this is a proper size for my particular gun, and the only thing that really stretched is of course the neck when it let the bullet out. So what we will do, this has already been decapped, which means the primer is removed. So the first step is take the spent brass and we'll put it in the press, and with everything lined up we just take it and run it up into the die and cycle that through. Now what that does is that actually sizes the neck, crimps this down, and takes the primer out. And we'll do this for all the brass that we're going to finish up. Now I'm down to my last piece of brass. This has not been decapped or sized. And what we have is we have the spent brass, and you see here's a bullet. You see it's been expanded because we fired this. When we resize it, we need to either resize the entire length of brass or we need to resize the neck. Because this is the bolt action, I have an option, bolt action or single shot, I have the option of just resizing the neck for my single gun because it fits my chamber. And you see now it's been properly sized. That won't go in there because it's been crimped down. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to use the full size die. Now we saw a while ago, we saw the neck collet die. So the way we would do it, to put this away, we take our brass, and just roll it on our oil pad. Run it up in here. Turn it to the full-size die. It's got the pin in it for decapping. And when we do, we run this up in here. We size the entire shell casing. Now, let's try it, see if it did any good. See? The bullet won't fit. It's been properly sized. Now what happens when we seat the bullet, it's going to, of course, fit that case. And that's about all we need to do at this stage. The next thing we need to do is we need to check the primer pocket. Now that's the little place where clearly the primer was. And you can do this with a tool or a little screwdriver. And all you really want to do is just go around and make sure that you get the soot out of there. Depending on what type of powder you shoot, this is more or less needed. And the primer itself will put a little bit of soot in there just by itself. So you just want to just gently run around there, just knock the stuff out of there. Don't need to scrape or do anything violent, nothing like that. Just a little quick little twist. And you might not do that at all. But what happens is, if the primer doesn't seat all the way in that case, where the cup is homed all the way down into that primer pocket, the anvil, when you try to detonate it with a primer, boom, it hits that center of that primer. What happens is you won't pinch the material and the primer won't go off. In fact, what will happen is it'll just move the material and the anvil forward if there's any play. But when you have the primer homed all the way down, seated all the way in there correctly, when the firing pin hits it and dents that primer, it pinches the center between the anvil and the deflected cup. And that causes compression. That's what makes it go boom. But if it's not all the way in, or if you've got soot or something like that and it can't make a good contact, or that anvil is able to move when it hits, it's probably not going to go off. Now some powders are dirtier than other powders. They're going to build up more gunk than others in the neck, and a little bit of blowback maybe down in the primer pocket. Ball powders tend to be, in general, a little bit dirtier, just a tiny bit dirtier in my opinion, than the quality powders, the stable powders, the extreme powders, such as, what am I using? Hodgdon 4831 shortcut in this particular cartridge. It's an extruded powder. Next we would brush out with a little handle. We got a little handle that the a 270 brush will fit in. We'll grab a spent case and we'll just run this little brush through the neck, the size neck of the brass. Now if you're using a collet, you're probably going to knock a little soot off when you use it. I generally, if I'm going to brush them after I've sized them. Although I guess I may keep my die a little cleaner if I brush them then size them. But again, I use a powder that's not particularly dirty.